Assembly for approval, but we don't draw the map. And then we have this question about what happens if we fail to adopt the map. We have actually, and you've heard from Delegate Levine, you've heard from Delegate Price, you've heard from Delegate Watts. You know, the current amendment that's unfixed, as it were, sort of says that any two members of the commission, the two legislative members, can just conspire together to send it straight to the Supreme Court. Ours says if you can't get 9 out of 11 members to agree, so talk about a supermajority, we get 9 out of 11, a consensus map, then we'll give the General Assembly the two maps that got the next highest number of votes to pick from. Keeping in mind, this is not going to be a monolithic commission. This has got 11 members, and they must, constitutionally must, not just enabling legislation, which can be repealed, they must represent a broad swath of Virginia. Thank you guys very much for the help with the poster. Madam Speaker, members of the House, I know we've been told we have no choice but to adopt this amendment. And I'm here to tell you today that there is another choice. There is another vote that you can take today. You can take a vote that tells your voters at home, that tells the people you campaign to, that tells the people that are sending you emails and postcards and making phone calls to your office that you care about and you want and you desire for this Commonwealth a true anti-gerrymandering amendment. You want redistricting reform that really does take politicians out of the mix. You are for a constitutional amendment that sets up a process where every Virginian has a voice and a seat at that table. And that's what we're asking for, Madam Speaker. We're asking for you members to understand, to hear the voices that say they've been marginalized and they say they need a place. Now, I've heard that your commission, Delegate Simon, your commission with 11 members, there's no guarantee that you'll have an equal number of Republicans and Democrats. To that I say, under the underlying amendment, communities of color, communities of interest, minority, disadvantaged communities, they have no guarantee of being enshrined on that either. There's nothing that protects. Now we say, well, we'll have enabling legislation that will fix that piece of it. So what I've heard is we can't trust the enabling legislation under my floor substitute to protect political minorities, but actual minorities need to rely on the enabling legislation that we will draft to know that they will have a seat at the table. That's unacceptable, Madam Speaker. This amendment is deeply flawed. I know that most of us know that it's not perfect. In fact, no one has told me it's perfect. Even the most ardent advocates have said it's not perfect, but nothing's perfect. It's going into our Constitution. And this has been a long and difficult process, and it's going to be just as long and more difficult to try and change it. We have an opportunity to vote for something better, Madam Speaker. I implore you all, please vote yes on this floor substitute. Let's restart this process. Let's send a signal to the governor that we want a truly independent, nonpartisan, citizen-led commission that will give us fair maps that will represent the needs of all Virginians. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Delegate Carter, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. There's been a pretty common theme in a number of the things that we've taken up in this legislative session. And that common theme is an urgency on the part of Democrats to do something on an issue that has long been denied. I spoke yesterday on the Virginia Clean Economy Act, on how I felt that Dominion Energy was taking advantage of our desire to do something to make us do the wrong thing. I voted on a number of gun bills, some in favor, some opposed, because I felt that in our urgency to do something, in some cases we were doing the wrong thing. Madam Speaker, I voted last year for the amendment because I had very little time to consider it. It was put together at the last second, in the final week of the session, as we stand here now, and it was held in front of me as a way of saying, do something on this issue. Now, in the time that I've been here, the 3 years, but especially this year, I've learned quite a lot of things about some members on the other side of the aisle. I've gained tremendous respect for the delegate from Chesapeake Delegate Leftwich. He and I worked together on the insulin bill. I've gained an understanding that the delegate from Albemarle is very, very careful with his words. And so, Madam Speaker, I would invite the members of this body to think about the delegate from Albemarle's words when he spoke a moment ago, because he was very, very careful with them. He said this is something that the General Assembly cannot undo. I believe that he chose those words very carefully, that he said precisely what he meant to say, and that is precisely why the Republicans are holding this before us as a way of saying, do something, Democrats, do something. Go ahead. Do something that the General Assembly can't undo. Madam Speaker, we've had bills that will end partisan gerrymandering. We've had bills that will end racial gerrymandering. But if we pass an unamended resolution today, it will go to the voters, I believe it will pass, and it will be something that the General Assembly cannot undo. And what that something is putting in place a commission with legislators, picking the people. And when I campaigned, I said that the people should pick the legislators, not the other way around. We will have 8 legislators picking the people. And if those 8 legislators cannot agree, if 2 of them refuse to go along with it, then it goes to the Supreme Court, who shall establish the districts. And what happens when the Supreme Court looks at the legislation that we passed? They'll say, oh, General Assembly, that's cute. But the Supreme Court shall establish the districts, regardless of the criteria, regardless of what we try to do. Because, as the delegate from Albemarle said, this is something that the General Assembly cannot undo. So if we're going to do something that we cannot undo, Madam Speaker, we'd better do it right. And I believe that this substitute gives us an opportunity to do it right, rather than just doing something that we cannot undo. Thank you.
Madam Speaker.
Levine.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Speaking to the amendment.
Delegate Levine, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. When it comes to the process of the amendment, we know what people, and at this point, virtually all 100 of us now say they want. Independent, nonpartisan redistricting with strong criteria to prevent gerrymandering. And that is in Delegate Price's bill. That is something we can do. That is something we can do this year. That is something we can do next year. We've talked about the fact that the constitutional amendment has no protections against gerrymandering. Even its sponsor admits that the Supreme Court can gerrymander us to oblivion with no appeal. It makes the Supreme Court the equivalent of the governor, the legislature, and everyone all combined. So the question comes down to a very simple question. It's really very easy. It's a question of who do you trust, right? Who do you trust? Do you trust, do we Democrats trust the delegate from Shenandoah and the delegate from Spotsylvania to be fair-minded with regard to gerrymandering? Or do we trust our colleagues to get this right? All of us are committed to nonpartisan, independent redistricting. Who do you trust? When I have a really tough decision, I try to look to see who I trust. And I hope that we trust each other enough to pass this substitute. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The delegate from Prince William, Delegate Rome.
This isn't about any of us as individuals. This is about how future processes will work. And further, the senator raised the point that the role of one black senator also pointed to the enabling legislation to back up. What he didn't say is that the enabling legislation probably won't even make it to 2031. What a difference a year makes, Madam Speaker, because we do have powerful black leaders this year, but last year we didn't. Last year we didn't even have diverse voices on the conference committee under Republican leadership. When we aren't at the table, who shall speak for us? There was, however, diversity at the table when we took a weak piece of enabling legislation and made it strong. That is the demonstrated factor that diverse voices lead to better products. Our request is not for quotas. Our request is simply for the commission to have to reflect the demographics of the Commonwealth. The last myth, Madam Speaker, has been debunked as well. This is the only year that we can do this until 2030. We have already voted on reform, and it is headed to the governor's desk. And we can do more, but we've got to do it right. The further issues that you've heard are actually probably the most important, because this would impact whether you're white, black, Asian, Republican, Democrat. And that is the timeline issue, Madam Speaker. There are significant problems with the timeline in the language of the amendment that could call into question the integrity of our ability to hold our elections without cutting into early voting, the time for our overseas friends to be able to vote, or maybe we should just have a short primary season for incumbent protection, Madam Speaker. But that's not what we fought so hard for the integrity and the pieces of legislation for our bills that we put through. We have had our private discussions on how bad the amendment is and that it doesn't need to be in our Constitution. And I am publicly stating for you now all of the flaws. We do not have to do this in this way. And I would submit, if you vote yes, you are consciously choosing to vote yes despite all of the flaws that have been outlined, despite the pleas from your colleagues to help put actual needed protections into your Constitution, and despite the diverse voices in your districts that they need you to stand with them too. And as I close, Madam Speaker, the emails have been asking us to vote yes, but they were based on these myths. My job as a leader is to go back home and debunk them, and that's what I've done. I have to base it on the actual words of the amendment that were debunked in part by the actual patron of this resolution and by several members who have spoken on the floor. But no matter how many times you say a myth, it doesn't make it true. We can't operate on myths, we must operate on facts. So you may want to vote for this in order to help restore trust in our system. But I would say that the trust you're asking the people to have is in two people who already demonstrated that they don't want to play by rules. Let's instead ask the public to watch our every step. Watch our every step as we work toward a better amendment. We have everyone on both sides saying that they want something. Let's give it to them. Madam Speaker, the fact is we need a resolution that actually addresses the concerns that spurred the cries for redistricting reform from the beginning. We've already passed the legislation that would end gerrymandering. We have the ability to do a legislative fix for a commission for 2021 and choose that 2021, together with those pieces, could be the most transparent, independent, and fair redistricting process that we have had that will not allow gerrymandering. That is what the people have asked for. And if you vote no today, we can still deliver on that promise. So I urge you to vote no on Senate Joint Resolution 18. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Delegate Jones, you have the floor.
Madam Speaker, members of the House, I was not going to say anything today because I felt like I said everything that I needed to earlier this week. But I have sat here and listened to these arguments down in our caucus room and on Twitter and here on the floor. And as I walked these halls these last couple of days, I thought about what brings me here. And that is, like Delegate Scott said, a calling and a commitment to service. But every time I am here, I am reminded about what my presence means in this building itself. This building and this Commonwealth and this democracy and this nation were built on the backs of people who look like me. And there were plenty of people who have served in this body and the one down the hall who were rolling over in their graves that people who look like me are sitting here today making the decisions for this state every year. But what most fascinates me and most enthralls me every time I step onto this floor, it really takes my breath away, is that this is the birthplace and cradle of democracy. And that, I think, is something that we talk about all the time here in Virginia. We are so proud of our role in this nation and how we got here. But when I look at this amendment, I see nothing democratic about it. I see nothing that pursues the perfection of the ideals that this state and this country were founded upon. And Delegate Scott's right, and a lot of other folks are right too. We deliberate on this stuff for a reason. We chew on it over and over and over again to make sure that we are getting it right. And I'm standing before you guys again to tell you that this is not the best that we can do. And we, as stewards of this democracy in this state, in this Commonwealth, have an obligation to make sure that we are seeking perfection. And each time we don't, we do ourselves a disservice, and we do those who come behind us a disservice too. So I said we have to let perfect be the enemy of the good in this case, and I will say it again, but if you have any ounce of respect and any ounce of value for democracy, you will vote against this amendment. This is the wrong path. Please, please vote no against this amendment.
Carter, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. One of the hardest things to understand is your own biases. We all come with them. They're built into our minds. We can work to be better the next day than we were the last, but it's work. And one of the biases that I constantly work on is trying to hear the words that come from black thoughts. Hear the words that are spoken in black voices. And I am going to stand up here now and attempt to use my white voice to air the words of black thoughts. There's a few quotes that I'd like to share with the body. Number one, if you're not careful, the newspapers will have you hating the people who are being oppressed and loving the people who are doing the oppressing. Delegate Price has spoken quite often about the way that this has been covered in the press, about the way that the newspapers have talked about this. And those words have been hard to hear for a lot of us, sometimes including me. But she has spoken about how the newspaper is covering this as a need to do something. But this is a way by which oppression can manifest itself in our redistricting. Madam Speaker, I have heard Delegate Price's words. Another quote: the most disrespected person in America is the black woman. The most unprotected person in America is the black woman. The most neglected person in America is the black woman. Madam Speaker, I hear the voices of the women in the Black Caucus who are telling me that this is not the way to protect the rights of minorities to have their voices heard in our Commonwealth. I hear that. And now I'm standing here repeating that, hoping that some of my friends in this body can hear those words in my white man's voice when they could not hear them in the voice of a black woman. And Madam Speaker, the third quote that I'd like to share with the body, and these were all from Malcolm X. The third quote that I would like to share with the body: if you stick a knife in my back 9 inches and pull it out 6, there's no progress. If you pull it out all the way, that's not progress. Progress is healing the wound that the blow made. And they haven't even pulled the knife out, much less healed the wound. They won't admit the knife is there. Madam Speaker, I'm standing here admitting that last year I helped put that knife in the back of my colleagues in the Black Caucus. And I am standing here hoping that the members of this body will help me try to heal that wound. Don't just pull the knife out 6 inches. Don't just pull the knife out and walk away. Madam Speaker, we've got to pull that knife out, and we have got to heal the wound. I hope that we will reject this resolution. Thank you.
Shall the Shall the resolution be agreed to? The clerk shall close the roll.
Ayes 54, nays 46, abstentions 0.
Ayes 54, nays 46, abstention 0. The resolution passes.
From my voice, you can hear a little bit of passion. It's because I'm the youngest man here in this body, in both chambers. I'm going to be 58 in 2050. I want everybody here to ask themselves how old they will be, or if they will be alive then. My generation will have to face the brunt of this. My generation will have to face the brunt of this. And scientists are telling us that by 2030, if we don't figure out a solution, we are in deep trouble. We are the leading polluters in the whole world. We need to lead by example. Virginia is a starting place for this. We need to make sure to start today.
Madam Speaker.
Delegate from Shenandoah. Delegate Gilbert.
Madam Speaker, will the delegate yield for a question?
Delegate
Will the delegate yield?
Yes, Madam Speaker.
The delegate will yield. Delegate Gilbert.
How is it that we are the #1 polluter in the world again? Does
We
the
are-
gentleman want to
Delegate-
revisit that comment?
Delegate Ibrahim Samira.
Madam Speaker, I would say to the delegate, we are the #1 country for production of carbon emissions in the entire world. Per capita, yes, we are.
Delegate Gilbert.
Madam Speaker, will the delegate yield for another question?
Madam Speaker, I will yield.
Delegate Samira yields. Delegate Gilbert.
I would very much appreciate it, all of us would, to know the source of the delegate's claim, given that the United States appears to be in the middle of both being the #1 producer of fossil fuel energy in the world and also doing the most to reduce carbon emissions in the world. What is the source of the delegate's claim?
Delegate
Madam Speaker,
Samira.
the United Nations has made it extremely clear, as I was mentioning earlier, that we as a nation are leaders in pollution. And we need to make sure that we control our carbon emissions so that the rest of the world catches up.
The delegate like to finish speaking to the bill? Delegate Samira.
Yes, Madam Speaker. The world's leading climate scientists have warned there's only a dozen years left to keep the maximum of 1.5 Celsius, beyond which even half a degree will significantly worsen the risks of drought. If we don't control that temperature rise, we are in deep trouble. And again, I plead to you to think about your children and your grandchildren as to how much work that we are doing on this. Do we have bills in this General Assembly right now that is addressing this environmental crisis? We do not. And we may be taking first steps, but we need to ensure that by 2030 we are carbon neutral. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The delegate from Fairfax, Delegate Helmer.
Madam Speaker, speaking to the bill.
Delegate Helmer, you have the floor.
Madam Speaker, climate change is the challenge of our times. You don't have to just listen to me. The Department of Defense says so. It's a threat to our national security. It's a threat to the future of our communities and our children. And it's recognized by members on both sides of the aisle, some of whom on the other side of the aisle who have brought bills before us to address the impact of episodic flooding. I hope it's the will of the body to pass this bill, which will not only create jobs in Virginia, not only protect our national security, but allow each of us to look in the eyes of our children and say, in the response to the largest threat of our time, we didn't do nothing. Instead, we passed the most important bill that we could pass in decades in this Commonwealth. I hope everybody will support it. Thank you.
The delegate from Fairfax, Delegate Sullivan.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Speaking to the bill.
Delegate Sullivan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker and ladies and gentlemen of the House, the most important thing I want to say to you today is I have no more amendments to this bill. I want to thank the body for its patience yesterday. It was a good discussion. and I thank Delegate O'Quinn for his comments this morning. This bill is the result of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of discussions, negotiations between what I think is the broadest group of stakeholders ever. But as I was discussing with the delegate from Scott yesterday, we know there are more discussions to be had. And I welcome Delegate O'Quinn's comments, and I want to assure the body that this bill not only already has as part of its focus making sure that the entire Commonwealth benefits from this, but I've given Delegate Kilgore and Delegate O'Quinn my personal word that we're going to continue talking about that. I want to draw your attention right now to about 7 lines of code that, if the body is so willing, we'll pass this body in just a moment. Starting on 1993 of the Clean Economy Act, it says that it shall be the policy of the Commonwealth. That is to say, the General Assembly is going to declare it the policy of this Commonwealth that the State Corporation Commission, DEQ, DMME, the Virginia Council on Environmental Justice, and all other applicable state agencies in the development of energy programs, job training programs, and placement of renewable energy facilities shall consider those facilities and programs being to the benefit of local workers, low-income geographic areas, and historically economically disadvantaged communities that are located near previously and presently permitted fossil fuel facilities or coal mines. We are saying as a part of our policy is in this bill that as we develop clean energy in Virginia over the course of the next several years, we focus on those parts of the Commonwealth. Madam Speaker and ladies and gentlemen of the House, as we prepare for what we know is coming, it seems to me that the time to act is now and not to wait until next year. This bill represents an historic opportunity for this General Assembly to take control of our energy future and set our Commonwealth on a path to be a national leader in what we know to be the necessary clean economy of the future. I hope this body will pass this bill. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Shall the bill pass? The clerk shall close the roll.
Ayes 52, nays 47, abstention 0.
Ayes 52, nays 47, abstention 0. The bill passes. You have the floor.
Having voted on the prevailing side by which we failed to pass HB 534, I ask the House to reconsider.
Page number?
That's a great question, Madam Speaker. What is it? 24, page 24, HB 534.
Delegate Delaney moves that having voted on the prevailing side, the House reconsidered the vote for HB 534 on page 24. All those in favor shall say aye. Aye. All those opposed, HB 534. Getting ready to vote. HB 534, shall the bill pass? The clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 52, nays 46, abstention 0.
Ayes 52, nays 46, abstention 0. The bill passes.
To just give localities the opportunity to look at, again, what they see as authentic history representing all of the citizens and residents in those localities that they live. This has been a very divisive issue, but I think if we're ever going to get to truth and reconciliation, that those divisive conversations need to be held. And if those divisive conversations are held and we be true to ourselves, then I believe we can make a difference. And I think that that is why we're at this place at this time, with the understanding that that very divisive conversation has been held. And as a result of that, people those who have been very much a part of this feel that there need to be a change. Now, unfortunately, as I look at this, I think that if there had been a balance to history in this Commonwealth, if truth had been told from the very beginning, if the authentic story of what this Commonwealth, historically the capital of the Confederacy, how they served one population against the other, maybe if the truth had been told in terms of erecting statues and telling everyone's story, not just talking about those individuals who are riding on their high horses, their contribution, but also the contributions of African Americans and how they helped build this nation, build this Commonwealth, and off of the backs of African American, many built and still stand. Maybe if that truth had been told, then we would not be here at this place at this time. The problem has been that half of the story has been told. And with that being said, then when you have statues and monuments that are high and lifted up and people riding on their horse saying, in many words, sending words of intimidation to a certain population, that I want to reminding that population that they were once subservient, that they were to be submissive. That's why they're big, that's why they're large, that's why they're in the public square. Because it's a message that was strategically placed for the benefit for a certain population of people. Personally, if they left the statues there, I wouldn't have a problem with it, as long as contextually the whole story was told. The entire story, that Robert E. Lee was the one who was perpetuating the continuation of slavery. If those stories are told along his statue at the base, leave the statue there. But also in doing, contextually telling the story, I want you to also raise up some other black individual African Americans who have made tremendous contribution to this Commonwealth and to this nation. Leave your statue there if you want to. But let the whole story, the entire story be told. That through blood, sweat, and tears, many of our foreparents had to fight just that all of us would be standing here today. And for you too, those who have not acknowledged it, they fought for you to have wealth and rich. They stood in places where your family did not stand. So we want to keep the statue. Again, do it if you must, but do not do it without putting the truth along the base of every person that's raised up on their horse. And then you start raising up people that look like me, who have made tremendous contributions to this Commonwealth of Virginia and this nation. Madam Speaker, I hope we pass the bill.
Shall the bill pass? The clerk shall close the roll.
Ayes 53, nays 46, abstentions 0.
Ayes 53, nays 46, abstention 0. The bill passes.